the Around the NFL podcast. Wants to get a haircut with Tom Brady.
From the Chris Wessling podcast studio, it's Around the NFL. I am Mystic Dan Hanzus, and I'm joined by heroes, Gregg Rosenthal, Marc Sessler. Right before we started, Mark was making a joke. Instead of Cabo, he said Cabo, and everyone freaked behind the glass and in front of it.
Sorry, I'm not, 3 times a month traveling outside of the country for some flighty vacation.
There is some type of internal gathering here where I think they're going to Cabo, but we weren't even invited. We have now aged out slash kind of been out of the mix enough within this building that no one's even checking and kicking the tires on the old heroes, whether they want to be involved.
I don't have any problem with not being invited because it makes a lot of too much sense. But the assumption is that we wouldn't be any fun. And I don't find that assumption correct. If you put us down in, you can fill in the blank island or locale, I think we could bring fun.
Oh, Mark trying to rebuild his reputation.
Rebuild.
Wants to rebound from the tough start of the show.
Yeah.
I say some words differently and
Cabo.
I'm constantly critiqued for it.
Feels like there's a lot's gone on since we last did a show. It's one of those type things. Jordan Rodriguez was a huge hit and around the NFC. We kept telling her, chill, you're doing great. Listeners are going to love you. And sure enough, like a huge outpouring out there in the internet that Jordan is a killer in-studio guest, and we should have her again.
A groundswell.
Soon. And I believe we will in time. Let's see. What else happened? Mark went to the Tom Brady Roast. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Greggy, I know you like rap. Drake and Kendrick Lamar, they've been feuding for days. We missed that. We missed that window. We could have had so much discourse.
For weeks, but we didn't miss it. It sort of was still going as of last night, so this would be well timed.
See how he subtly corrected me to let the rap heads know that he gets it?
I'm just saying, it did feel like last night was maybe the end of it. So now, it's a solid.
I feel like we missed, but maybe it's been for weeks, but I feel like right after the show ended, Drake and Kendrick were
yes, Thursday night it went
let's
wild.
Volcano.
Let's turn this into a wildfire and put the guys in a tough spot, as happens with the news sometimes.
That was their main motivation.
That was it.
I was like, where are you going with this? Because not much football news happened in between, but yes.
Now the free agency is in the rear view. The draft is in the rear view. Rookie camps underway, OTAs, and all that other stuff is coming up. What's left? Like with these teams, when you look at these rosters, they now had their opportunity, these teams. They had their opportunity to plug all the holes, but have they? That's the question. And we're going to get into teams where there's still stuff hanging out there. There's still question marks around these rosters. So we'll get into that. But first, anything, Greg? I got you in the corner of my eye doing a look over.
No, I'm good.
Let's do some news.
Gronk, I've been watching you on Fox NFL Sunday, and I'm begging you, please, stop doing your job.
Bill Belichick at the Tom Brady Roast. That's courtesy of Netflix. Mark, what was the vibe there at the Fabulous Forum?
It's pretty wild. I was telling Greg beforehand that it reminded me of even when we've gone to, whether it's like Thursday Night Football here at SoFi or the Super Bowl, where like when you watch it, the television copy later, like the halftime show looks completely different. Like parts of the game look completely different. Things that you just wouldn't see being there as a human. Like I had that feeling with this because it was a wild, raucous setting. I was up in not the cheap seats, but close. So you couldn't really see
And you got these as a gift, right? The tickets?
Yes, yeah.
What are your thoughts on maybe whoever got them for you not going that extra mile, getting you a little closer to the stage? Let's stop down just to talk about that a little bit.
That wasn't my main takeaway. Like I kind of liked, I think the price increased drastically as you try to get closer to the
All right, I'm sorry.
the
Go
stage.
on.
But okay, I'll think about that.
You could have definitely pulled some favors here, gotten probably
He's not.
free
That's not his
tickets.
thing. That's not
I
his
was
thing.
actually asked in reverse why that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So, it was not a critique. It was more just an ample question. It's like, I don't know anyone at this company anymore. Let's start there. I know like 6
Mark,
people here.
Not this
Think
company.
bigger. Think bigger.
I also, I don't. If you get a surprise, you don't want to then try to upgrade it and change
makes
it. That's
more
rude.
sense.
So,
That makes more sense. That was way ahead of
it was an electric atmosphere, and I think the one thing that I noticed was I was like, "What is this going to be a bunch of like transplanted Patriots fans?"
Mm-hmm.
And we were sitting near like a flock of like drunken, angry Giants fans who were like razzing Tom Brady from the bleachers in the state. So it was kind of a wild crowd up where we were. And then I think it got richer and more wealthy as you got closer to the stage. Right?
Nice. Fun time.
There wasn't like it was 3 hours long. Like there wasn't a down moment. I thought those things are typically good, but they nailed it like over and over. And I thought the one thing I thought like it was good for the Patriots too, because like suddenly you're in this moment where it's like Bill Belichick and Brady were coaxed up to do a shot together. Robert Kraft, who took a number of strays early in the show,
including one that led Tom Brady to actually threaten the Roastmaster General Jeff Ross.
Yeah. I mean, I assume that's like the kind of thing we didn't catch sitting where we were seeing it on TV. I realized it caused a big stir. But like all these Patriots were there, and after like the documentary that came out and stuff, it seemed to do a lot more to honor the Patriots in a weird roundabout way than that documentary. Like they all seemed much happier to do this, even though at the times like the look on Tom Brady's face seemed like maybe stop mentioning Giselle for the 400th time and what's been taken from either of our fortunes.
I think that's part of the reason why I wasn't interested in watching it live, because I think Claybon made the point, and I did too. I've avoided a lot of this post-Patriots afterglow, the productions, because I just don't need more Patriots. Like if you're a Patriots fan, you're all over it. If you don't have any type of complicated relationship with the Patriots, maybe you just love it because it's football content. I was perfectly fine with, seeing what came out on Twitter, and there was some, good stuff out there, some funny lines. And I thought Belichick, he had a good one, or one written for him, where he talked about, that he was at this roast, and he mentioned that that aforementioned Patriots 10-part documentary was also like the Bill Belichick roast, which the crowd kind of got into. I have some insider reporting I want to get out there.
ATN. Media Insider. Dan Hanzus. For the truth, go to the Zeus. Zeus are in the morning, except no substitutes.
All right, so being an insider comes with responsibility. It comes with important and necessary guardrails.
Yeah.
Knowing what to report, knowing what to holster. The best of us have a whole notepad filled of scoops that we never share.
Yeah, it's a dance, I would imagine.
And that's for relationships and so much more. I say this because I want to report something that kind of touches on this. I have multiple sources connected to this event that said when Gregg reported Bill Belichick would be on the roast, which is, by the way, information I also had, but had holstered.
Mm-hmm.
The producers were so upset because Bill Belichick contemplated dropping out of the event because he wanted it to be a surprise. And thank God he was talked into appearing on the show, the program, because it was one of the hits of the night having him there.
Yeah.
And I just want to put it out there. He was there, but it went from him doing it to him, we might be losing Bill because of Greggy. His reporting, putting it out there and making it no longer a surprise, which Bill desperately, according to my sources, multiple sources, very close to the event, had said that Bill did not want this to get out beforehand. So on one level, Gregg, yes, you had the scoopage.
Yeah.
And that's great.
You want the truth, you go to the Rosenthal.
On the other hand,
Doesn't ring as poetically.
it came very close to hashtag Greggy ruins everything.
Well, maybe.
So we got to talk about what matters ultimately in the world.
Ultimately, the truth matters, I believe. Getting it out there matters. But also, you're getting it from a source, maybe also inside the production that
Multiple sources
wanted it out there.
In fact,
so
triple source.
Right. The one that wanted the information out there, that maybe it'd be good for buzz, that would be happy with it being out there. So maybe they calculated what could happen based on that, and they realized in the end, Bill Belichick was out there. So I'm not protecting the fat cats up there in the highfalutin offices making all the money. I go to the truth, and then he got out there. He was up there.
I mean,
this
have
whole
it the other way around.
Right.
You were protecting the fat cats and doing their work for them. You were carrying their water and promoting the event.
I just thought it was
whereas
interesting.
Bill himself
Yeah.
was the one that was, I didn't want that out there. And then the audience, us, average Joes, we almost missed having Bill there and all the fun from the event.
Well,
Listen, this isn't me throwing daggers at you, Greg. I know we're kind of now competitors. I see you in some ways as like a hungry young apprentice in this game. So I don't want to come down on you hard. I'm just letting you know this was what was happening around this story. It's like an onion.
It bothers me that Belichick, if he even contemplated in the 11th hour not attending this, that if he's that sensitive and needs things to be such a special,
I don't believe that. I could believe that he would be unhappy.
I don't think.
I also
just
don't believe
think he really was about to. Also, by the way, it would have had to people. The whole thing's written and it's on teleprompter. It would have had to cause everyone to wipe out
That
about
happens all the time in the
700 other like.
in live television. That happens.
Now that said,
thank you. I don't need to be taught that. I understand that
Right.
it would have been an annoyance. I thank you, television man. But like, it's like that's not. It's just that it would have been hyper annoying. Like he was the centerpiece of the show.
My point
was.
exactly. And
He
we
was.
almost lost him. There's this guy over here.
I mean, you're trying to seek truth. I get it,
Yes.
Greg. But
But
At
also,
what
there's
expense?
different
At what
agendas.
expense?
Maybe they calculate. I don't think Bill Belichick would have been so sensitive. And as for the surprise aspect, I have to guess for 95% of the people watching that, they did not know Belichick was going to be on that anyways. Not everyone is like living on.
But then when he's on it,
Twitter.
it also wasn't a surprise.
What do you mean?
I didn't find it surprising that I thought that either like Belichick or Giselle, one of the two, would somehow get their way onto this show.
I would not have. Giselle would have been shocking to me, and I'm with you that Tom
Belichick's
Brady
doing like a ton of media right now.
Tom Brady looked, those were hard because it's his family. It's painful. He's getting all these karate jokes, and I haven't seen the whole thing, but I watched the beginning like that and Belichick and enough so far just because I was out. And that's got to be painful. And it reminded me of the timing of this because it's like, why is Tom Brady doing this? Like I saw some people say like, oh, who would you want to roast next out of athletes? And I just can't imagine, there's enough people that are important enough that it would be this compelling. And then of the people important enough, like, why would you even really want to do that? And it got me thinking of the gestation project of this because we know through our original reporting, this was supposed to be a couple of years ago before he ever got divorced, that we thought he might be retiring in part because this was like cautiously on an upcoming docket of what he was planning to do in his post life. And at that point, it was too late to back out. Although he's Tom Brady, he could have backed out. And he came off great in it, and he took the jokes, and he did fine when he had.
Except for the crap one. That was getting up on the dais and throwing out a threat.
That made me wonder, and I have no information, but knowing how these things work, there are things that are off limits.
Oh,
and that made
absolutely.
That made me wonder.
But not much was off limits in terms of how Tom Brady was treated.
But that made me wonder if that was off limits, and he just
delving into it. I would imagine that was one of the agreements for the owner to come on this show. Do not involve certain conversations, and they did.
Well, he's 12
and Brady
feet away. Right.
was very steadfast about that. He was probably furious about it.
Yeah.
Actually, he was furious enough to get up and
do
on
an
live
angry
television.
whisper in the ear.
I do love that Belichick spent weirdly a minute doing 3 Matt Light jokes, which was like, what? That was one takeaway on a night that was great, I think, for Patriots fans. It did feel like a little bit of closure. Seeing Belichick and Brady go back and forth was awesome as a Patriots fan. That I love.
And I totally could see that being the case. Like, I could see why, even as, the way things ended, it's never fun when things end. But Bill and Tom ultimately being cool makes sense to me. They went through so much together. They're linked forever in history. They love each other, I'm sure. The owner and the coach situation.
Well, that's recent.
Yeah. And the way, if I were Bill, the way that documentary, the Apple documentary played out, it wouldn't go down so easy. So he wasn't down to play ball in that respect. And, let's get to the news.
Great job by the writers, by the way.
They nailed it. Like the one, like Tony Hinchcliffe, who has his own show. Like these guys that probably Tom Brady's never heard of for the most part. Like he came up and thanked Gronk
Tony
for
Hinchcliffe.
He's pretty big.
He is in that world, and not like in the roasting world. But he thanked Gronk for taking a break from writing letters to Santa to join them. Like Gronk took about 800 Verbal
friend
fist
of the
to the
show,
face.
Nikki Glazer,
She was
had a great line making fun of Tom losing $30 million in crypto, and he's like, even Gronk knows that you don't mess with crypto. No real money. Gronk no do. I was like, yes, good joke.
And friend of the show, our former coworker Chris Brockman. You know, his partner Sarah Tiana was one of the writers. Megan Gailey, who does a show with Dave Damashek, was one of the writers. Like all connected.
My throwback podcast partner and bosom buddy, Bob Castrone, worked on the project as well.
Fun.
So good stuff, all fun. Let us now.
And I think it was a big success too. Good job.
Seemed like it. Also, never underestimate dropping something at the right time. The greatest example will always be The Last Dance with Michael Jordan in the middle of COVID. But if you drop something like this on Sunday night, May 5th, like it's going to do well.
The one mistake I made, this was a grave mistake I realized about 82 seconds into the affair, was that I texted like Luke and Colton, my children who are still young. I was like, Dad's going to be watching this Tom Brady event at the Forum. Like, check it out. And like, within about a minute into it, like every body part had been mentioned, every swear that you could come up
He's
with.
like, Daddy, who's Aaron Hernandez?
That would have been the least of my worries.
Heavens to Betsy.
I'm sure you got a sharply worded tweet.
I got no response.
From other parties involved, I meant. All right, let's get into it. Odell Beckham. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this is definitely where he's going to end up. He was always going to end up in Miami playing for the Dolphins at some point in his life, and now it is upon us. Rap Sheet reported that Miami is expected to sign veteran wideout Odell Beckham, 1-year deal up to $8.25 million. So that's
Miami.
his base salary is $3 million here.
Whew.
Now, this was a guy who I think he made 15 guaranteed with Baltimore. That was one of the worst free agency signings of last year. So this is now more in line with where Odell Beckham is now. I mean, I would assume he's finally in his 30s, probably about 31 now. Feels like he's been around forever, obviously. But yeah, he's not an old wide receiver, but he's had some major serious injuries. It should be pointed out that in addition to the injuries, Greggy, Baltimore kind of phased him out of the offense down the stretch and did not show interest in bringing him back. But if you want to spin positive, if you want to talk yourself into Odell Beckham yet again in the offseason, going there as the third banana in the offense maybe gives him something in South Beach.
I think he's a role player right now. He's getting paid as a low-level wide receiver role player. Like maybe we're going to mention the DJ Shark signing. I don't know. He went to
Go ahead.
Let
it rip.
The Chargers. And
It's
like
time.
those guys are making similar money. I think Shark is actually making more. So that's sort of the level I'm talking about, which is a third, fourth receiver. And when he was on the field last year, he was a potentially useful player just in that role. And being on an offense with Waddle and with Tyreek Hill, like he's gonna be in really ideal circumstances, and he could be helpful in that role because going through their lineup, they have a big drop off after those two. They have Braxton Berrios as their 3. They don't really have a 3, so he could contribute, but he just can't stay on the field. That was his biggest issue in Baltimore, is like he couldn't stay healthy for more than 3 games in a row
Since maybe his 4th year.
Because
at this point.
there was
He can't stay healthy.
Right, there was a couple crossing patterns with Baltimore where he actually got the ball in the open fields. Like he still was pretty explosive, but he just couldn't stay healthy or consistent.
They drafted Malik Washington. I think what I like about it is that the ceiling. There was only a handful of teams with an absolutely locked and loaded 1 and 2 at wide receiver. So clearly, yes, he's the third guy there. But I trust like Mike McDaniel to get the most out of almost any player on that side of the ball. More than I do Todd Monken in the first year with a Ravens team that was trying to amp up and become more balanced. But it's like Odell did get better down the stretch, but then they limited his role. So it's like I kind of think this is a perfect landing spot. It always made sense.
Devil's advocate. I mean, the thing that the Dolphins need to get better at is being a late season football team, like being a kind of a badass team when the elements turn against you. And Odell Beckham wearing 17 layers of clothing and his entire face covered up except for his eyes in January is something I could picture. And don't imagine he's that guy that's that rough and tumble guy to take you to the promise.
That's also one of about 8 players on offense that I don't trust to fare well in negative 23-degree temperatures no matter what.
Right. They need to get some home games finally. But yeah, he was frustrated. I mean, we were at that game in London. It was kind of a disaster. There were a couple games where Lamar Jackson just didn't feel like he could trust that Odell would be in the right spot at the right time, and that's why I think
Odell had a major
kind of
gaffe in that
Rashad
game against the
Bateman.
Titans.
He was very bad the first half of the season. Seemed to find his footing in the back half of the regular season, but then kind of lost his role in the offense down the stretch. Not the same type of player, but another high-profile veteran receiver that hung on for a while. Deshaun Jackson. Remember, at the end of his career, he would pop up every once in a while and still be making big plays, but was no longer a consistent player in an offense. I could see Odell being that for Miami. We shall see. In other news, it is light out there, by the way, as you would think. So not a ton of news. So let's do some 50-year rookie deal options. The roundup. Najee Harris, Steelers running back, declined. The Cowboys, not a surprise here. They declined Trey Lance's 50-year option. Of course, he was drafted number 3 overall a few years back. The Broncos do the same with the number 2 overall pick in that draft, Zach Wilson. Not a surprise there. Greg Newsome, Oda Owa, and Kitty Pay among the options picked up for the 5th year.
I thought that the Najee Harris was not surprising. I think Jalen Warren's going to have a much bigger role, and I think they want to get faster. Greg Newsome was dangled in like trade talks going back to like last offseason and throughout, around the trade deadline last year a little bit. So that I like that. I think Greg Newsome is like quietly an extremely solid cornerback. And if I'm the Browns and Jim Schwartz, like don't take anything away. Just keep it going for as long as you can.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised by the Najee Harris declining because it's running back. It's only $6.8 million. They didn't want to lock into a 1-year, $6.8 million contract. He's not going to be thrilled about that. Right behind him, for instance, Travis Etienne making a slightly less money because he's 1 pick later. They picked up his option. I think you look at some of the players that like Owe was a little surprising to me, like $13.3 million. He's been like slowly getting better. There were some no's out there. Tryon Shoyinka got a no. Peyton Turner, who's Eric Stokes. Those guys just haven't been on the field enough. Remember Alex Leatherwood, not eligible in this draft, no longer in the NFL. Zaven Collins got a no. But Justin Fields was another one. Just checking the box. Like, of course they're not picking it up. I guess it's 1 year, $25.7 million. But it just shows what a weird situation that Bears. That Steelers team.
And one like little note with Fields, because remember we were talking about this thing that's been floated out that they could use Fields as a return man. Like that's possible, and I kind of think it's an interesting concept. But they have Cordero Patterson too, and they got him specifically like soon after that whole kickoff thing changed.
Wait, so only one of those quarterbacks that's hitting me now of the 5 taken got their option pick.
2021 draft.
Messy.
Not for nothing was the first draft after COVID shut down the entire world and most of college football.
Kadarius Toney was a big no too. Not a surprise again, but just checking boxes here.
You mentioned Alex Leatherwood. I was thinking when the Michael Penix pick went down with Atlanta, and I was like, when's the last time there was a pick that was so head-scratching or was immediately panned at such a high level? It was the Raiders taking Alex Leatherwood, I think around 20 or so, 21 in that realm. And immediately, I remember all the guys on the dais for NFL Network and everywhere else were like, they're going through their notes. It's like, I had him as maybe like a 3rd-round guy. He might be the ultimate example, and of course, he flamed out immediately with the Raiders. He might be the ultimate example of why you don't just draft for a position or a need. You have to go best available player, and the Raiders, I think with Mike Mayock, made that mistake.
Well, there's a study out there that kind of over the last 10 years shows where teams drafted and how much value, according to like consensus big boards, how it even out. And the best teams get the best value where they draft. And the Raiders were dead last over the last 10 years. They made a lot of like zigging, zagging picks that didn't work.
The other one I thought of actually wasn't quite as big as Penix, but in terms of a top pick, shocking everyone, was Cleveland Farrell, which was also Mayock. It's actually his first pick.
Yep.
And it was the number 4 overall pick. And everyone's like, wait, really? Like he's a solid player, but no one thought he was a top 15 player.
They had multiple number 1s in that draft, and none of them were with the team anymore.
And we talked about, Jordan did that great deep dive of the Rams draft. The teams like the Raiders, for instance, that keep churning and starting over, not just at head coach. Sometimes you think, oh, they fired a GM, they hired a new GM. In a lot of cases, you're bringing an entire new football language, and before you could even install a new one and even know if it works, that guy's out and you're starting again. And I guess these are examples of teams. And when's the last time the Raiders were in the Super Bowl? I don't know, 25 years ago, 23 years ago. Not a lot of success.
Win a playoff game first.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the Saints. Mickey Loomis, the GM. They made a move at the draft, drafting Kool-Aid McKinstry, who is a very toolsy cornerback. A lot of a lot of people believe Kool-Aid has a chance to be, a star at corner. And then there's the situation with veteran Marshawn Lattimore. Once upon a time, a big-time draft pick by the Saints back in 2017. Now the idea is, are they looking to move Lattimore with McKinstry in the house? Here's what Loomis had to say on Mad Dog Sports Radio.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. Marshawn's been a really good player for us for a good period of time. He's one of the leaders of our team, and look, it's just like I said, we can use as many corners as we can get, and we've got a good group, a really good group, and they're going to help each other, and they're going to help our team win.
Gregg, they have a very talented cornerback room. What is the idea why they would move Lattimore? Is that their perpetual issues with cap space and trying to finally gain some level of financial freedom?
There was some reporting just last year that he wasn't happy, and it was personal, maybe between him and the coaching staff, and that's popped up. I think when it comes to trades, though, and I've seen a lot of people like just throwing out like, oh, what could be some trades that could come up? It's like trades aren't happening at this point. What is the point of getting a draft pick in a trade in the middle of the summer that you could just get after the season? Now, if injuries happen and you're in training camp, that's where it's possible where a guy like a CD Deuce, shook loose from the Saints. And I could see Lattimore being a guy like maybe in training camp once you get to the middle to later, once you get like closer to cut days. But like from now until then, like those big name receivers, like they're not going anywhere. The window passed.
I might also say that if you lose Lattimore because of Dennis Allen's second very notable like internal tiff with the player, that's how you lost Gardner Johnson. Like that, these are both from your secondary. You trade them post June 1, or cut them. You still are dealing with a lot of dead cap money. So it's like it would only save them about $4 million this year, cost them 10 plus in dead cap money, 10 plus in dead cap money the year after, 7 plus the year after that, and then still the year after that. So it's not that financially, it's not financial wizardry necessary.
I believe he might have been an ex-Saint if they got like a nice offer, but people are just so anxious about trading for these picks for veterans, which is crazy because then they get in the draft and they're throwing like future picks around willy-nilly to move up 10 spots. But
look at the Vikings, but they gave up. Yeah, like, and again, the veteran trade tax.
You're right.
Lattimore, it's like, oh man, I would love to have Lattimore on my team, but it would cost me like a second-round pick, maybe. No,
I don't
you
buy
get him
into
for
that.
a fourth.
Right.
Go get him if your team needs a corner. We're going to talk about needs in a little bit.
You're also hoping, like, it's nice to say Kool-Aid McKinstry is like fills a need. Like, okay, not a lot of cornerbacks don't work. So,
and I just want to say about 2 minutes ago, I want to apologize to the listeners, to you guys as well. But I'm working with an alternate laptop today. Couldn't locate my work laptop. And
the biggest concerning development with one of our laptops since I spilled coffee on mine twice in 6 months.
I mean, I know you know me, but like those who know me on a truly personal, like at home level, I lose stuff all the time.
Okay.
And it usually turns
like
out.
a laptop, though.
Yeah, like stuff that you would never think, how could that be lost?
You wouldn't just have left it out like a coffee bean or something.
Possible. I went to the car wash after the show as a true working man on Thursday and took the bag out of the car when I was vacuuming.
Ooh.
Put the bag back in. How would the laptop get out? It doesn't matter. So the point being, I'm using
Robbery,
a laptop.
yeah.
And I had the volume up. And then I got a text from a friend. And it can't be scrubbed out by ATP because I was talking at the time of the ding. So now, about 3 minutes ago, there's tens of thousands of listeners who are going to hear that ding. And they're going to go check their phones. And then they're going to look at it. And there's not going to be a text. And it's because of me and my failure to hit the mute button on a rogue laptop.
I think
I'm
your
sorry.
apology will go a long way to the tens of thousands that will obviously. But I'm glad you mentioned it because that's a similar sound effect we use when someone says something that's very factual or astute or kind of next level.
Or really anything at all.
Well, yeah, but you were rolling through a setup point and then got a ding, and I'm like, why did Eric reward you? Why did you get that sound effect? You said nothing out of the ordinary. So. Makes me feel better.
That would really
with
mess
Eric.
with the listeners if Eric replaces his ding with the traditional Apple texting. Don't do it.
The accountability is off the charts here. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. What else is in the news? Quote unquote news. JJ Watt He retired. I think I lost the sandwich because I thought Watt would come back last year. I kind of thought he'd end up playing with his brother, TJ, in Pittsburgh. But he stayed out of football last year, did some TV work. But J.J. Watt says if his original football team, the Houston Texans, and their head coach picked up the phone, he'd answer. Let's listen to this.
I've had 12 great years in this league, and I'm very thankful to have walked away healthy and playing great. I told D'Amico last year, I said, don't call unless you absolutely need it, but if you ever do call, I'll be there. But he knows not to call unless he absolutely needs it. This is the last year I'll tell him that because I'm not going to keep training the way I've been training, but he knows that if he ever truly does need it, I'll be there for him.
Notable. Brandon K. Scott with the credit there on Twitter. Before he made that last comment, I was going to say, for a guy who's been out of football now for over a year, he looks exactly like J.J. Watt many, many times, and you could figure out why. It's natural. When they step away from the game, they stop training at the same level, and their physique gets slimmer or whatever. He looks like he's still, what was he, 6'6", 260 or whatever?
We saw him at the Super Bowl, and he's not like a normal human.
And he's saying he's training he's football ready right now still. That is notable to me and something to keep in mind.
And I saw a thing where he went through, and I kind of love finding out about this stuff. Like he went through what his diet is to maintain like the Watt shape.
So much work, yeah.
And it's like 7,000 plus calories a day. But you're all
Still?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what he was doing when he was a player. And
Right.
so if he looks exactly the same, it's got to be in the realm of that if he wants to. This is the power of CJ Stroud to me, because he left the Texans with, some issues with ownership and all that stuff. But it's like suddenly this team looks like a Super Bowl
I'll also
team.
say the power of D'Amico Ryans, who is
Sure, him
J.J.
too.
Watt's former teammate with Houston. They were once the stalwarts of a defense together, and now he is the head coach, and he's got obviously the respect of J.J.
So the
Justin
offseason
James.
the offseason news moves slow in some ways, but whenever you just get a little bite, suddenly it moves fast. And they actually someone tracked down D'Amico Ryans, who was at a Texans event today. He says, "I need him now. Anytime JJ's ready to go, I'm ready to go."
I mean, as a situational pass rusher would be incredible, but yeah, we're not going to get sucked into the May 6th rumor mill, but it's good to relay.
You should do it, and part of the reason I think it was interesting to talk about is Les Snead threw out this on the Rich Eisen show last week too, just that Aaron Donald, like, hey, I had mentioned to Aaron when he retired, we had a guy in Eric Weddle who just kind of jumped off the couch to join the playoffs. So maybe if you'd want to do that, that'd be it'd be an option for you. He says he doubts Aaron Donald would actually do that.
I don't know. I could see that happening.
The Rams might ask, and they actually structured his contract and retirement in a way that would be very doable if Aaron Donald would want to. But he says that they might try to tempt him, but they don't know.
They should do more of these, like veterans with special powers are brought onto the scene, like Joe Flacco, like in November and December. Don't make them go through all this nonsense leading up to it. If the team's in position, you bring Aaron Donald back in for 60 days, and he dominates, and he gets a Super Bowl ring.
Do it. Love to see it.
There's just a category of players like that.
Justin James Watt turned 35 years old in March. All right, that's what's happening in the news. Let's take a break and talk about some outstanding team needs. I don't mean outstanding like, oh, it's outstanding. I mean outstanding like a debt, like a tax bill. Okay, we'll be right back.
And we are back. We're back. Show it is again. continuing. I mean, the only upside here is that I didn't somehow verbalize a third version of that over the double version that already exists.
Could happen though. Like that, it could happen. It wouldn't be like that wasn't on purpose either. And if it did happen again, it would have the triple.
It only happened that time because your directions were fuzzy compared to the directions you gave, like a Jordan on our last show, or Colleen. Like the ones given to me were fuzzy, and I faltered. And I don't blame myself.
I don't know why I love it so much. Unfinished business. That was the one I was trying to get that out at the top of the show. Segment, unfinished business. Teams are now pretty much, and there are still, Greggy, there are still roster moves to be made. There's not a lot of options out there, but there are options. There are players out there, and there will be cuts and all that stuff, and maybe J.J. Watt comes out of retirement. You never know. But as things stand now, Greggy. There's going to be teams that are enter the season with voids. So let's get into them. Let's talk about them. Maybe they're not. Maybe they only seem like a roster issue, and we'll have a conversation, and it won't be that way. And I'll get this one going, and I will start with a team that I think everyone agrees is a bit of a intellectual curiosity right now. It is ATP's favorite team. It is the Buffalo Bills. And you could go in maybe a couple different directions for this team that's been so close to getting over the hump, but they haven't yet. I was going to say, did they make it to the AFC title game yet with Josh Allen once?
Yeah.
One trip to the game.
Infamous Stephon Diggs staring at the confetti. Photo.
Rough. And now they're trying to go at it in a different angle with some turnover on the roster. I'll talk about the wide receivers because I'm curious in general here. This is not just this offseason, but when you look at their depth chart, where's the investment been at this position during the Stephon Diggs and now the post-Diggs era? We know the Bills traded back twice out of the first round. They took Keon Coleman last month in the second round. We'll see how he turns out. But I always think that with wide receivers, in most cases, there are special cases, and there could be a couple of special cases at the top of this draft with Marvin Harrison and Neighbors and Adunze, but banking on a first-year wide receiver to fill your void if you have a big one at wide receiver is risky business, and that they're kind of asking that of Keon Coleman right now. However, Coleman, he looks like a lottery pick as a second rounder compared to the rest of the depth chart. Gabe Davis was a 4th round pick in 2020. He's in Jacksonville now. Khalil Shakir was a 5th rounder in 22. Justin Shorter, a 5th rounder in 23. And then you look at who else they have there. Free agent acquisitions, Curtis Samuel, KJ Hamler, Chase Claypool. Those guys were all 2nd round picks, but on other teams, and they're to varying degrees, in my opinion, depreciated assets. Former 4th round pick Mac Hollins is also on this team now. Cool.
It's a lot of guys, a lot of names.
And listen, I love Josh Allen. Actually, Josh and I are spirit canines, as Jordan pointed out last week. But I don't want to watch number 17 throwing to a bunch of second-rate playmakers like Patrick Mahomes was a year ago. And I'll end with a movie quote here, Marky. Like Basher, Don Cheadle's character in Ocean's 11 said, "It will be nice working with proper villains." Actually said it in a terrible English accent.
Yeah.
And I have a terrible English accent, so I'll do it. It'll be nice working with proper villains again. Allen will have to wait at least another year for the dawn of that reality, because right now these are not proper villains, in my opinion, at the wide receiver.
Yeah, they did such a good job early in Allen's career building up around him quickly, and they're having to move through a different phase of all that. Dalton Kincaid is a big factor, though. I kind of think what you've got a real weapon in him at tight end. But you're right. It's a bunch of dudes that are like names alone, like Andy Isabella. You've got like a Keon Coleman. You're hoping right away contributes. They've already said like he has to, and Josh Allen knows he has to. I don't love that for any first-year wide receiver, especially early on, because it's like going from college to pros and different playbooks, different schemes. Like there is an adjustment there. But I also don't just like wide-out rooms where if you get one injury here to a key figure, you are staring at bottom-of-the-barrel talent around Josh Allen.
I like this group more than you guys do, just because I like Curtis Samuel. Like I can't get.
I do too. I would say I didn't. I felt
fine.
even when I was doing that setup that I don't. He's not much of a depreciated asset, but he has bounced around the league a little bit.
And he's a role player. Your guys are right that there's a bunch of role players. Coleman was a divisive draft prospect. Some people had him as like a 3rd or 4th round guy. Others, Bucky Brooks and plenty of other people had him as like a top 5 receiver in this class, like a physical guy who I thought would make more sense in the slot. My problem is like I like Shakir. He's shown he's an NFL player. He's a
but as a guy next to a 1 and someone else.
Yeah, exactly. As like a 3, as like an inside player who's going to get open. Samuel's profile is a little similar to me to Shakir, and then you have Coleman, who I thought would do his best work on the inside. And you have Kincaid, who to me is part of this, and Dawson Knox is part of this. And that's what you're hoping for, is that an offensive line and the tight ends and the running backs essentially make up for these receivers. But yeah, you mentioned, I didn't even realize how many he's on this team. Claypool, Mac Hollins. Mac Hollins can play. He's like a 4th receiver who's a special teamer. Andy Isabella is probably not making this team, but he is on this team. KJ Hamler, like I loved for a few minutes, and then he's had devastating injuries. Unfortunately, like there's just a lot of names, a lot of guys.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Eric, unless you know, but I'm going to check. When's the last time they used a first-round pick on a wide receiver? Diggs they traded for. They traded a first-round pick to get Diggs.
I mean, off the top of my head, are we going back to Stevie Watkins
okay,
trade?
Sammy Watkins.
Sammy
there it
Watkins,
is.
sorry.
Yep, you're right. They traded
Yeah.
up. They traded a bundle to get, and maybe that's a reason why organizationally, because Watkins never really came through. But they traded up to get Watkins in 2014, which was the dark ages of the Buffalo Bills. But that's the last time that they've gone in that direction. All right, Mark, you want to go next?
Yeah. For me, looking around, I like this exercise because you're like looking at our lads and kind of seeing where things just do not work.
Can we hit the big funk music in a second?
Cup of water is being brought to Dan.
Everyone, really, you got to subscribe on YouTube. Check us out to see Big Funk step into
Big
the
Funk
studio,
does it all.
deliver water.
Big Funk is not only a gifted producer and social man. When Mystic Dan forgets to get
Wait,
some
you're
water.
now Mystic Dan? That's pretty good, actually. I like that.
Big Funk does it all. Gets the water. He does it all. Ooh. Sorry, Mark.
What are the odds that I'd get 8 words into my segment point here, and not only is like fluids being brought into the room, but we're breaking into song and dance.
I was parched, and I thought it was affecting my performance.
Was
an
it a
emergency.
psychic connection that allowed that to happen?
But Mark has a point here. It's obviously not going to be you that's getting interrupted by Randy.
I interrupt myself all the time.
Right, coming in though. I mean, and doing the song. But for some reason, if it was me or Mark, who's gonna, and it just by chance, who's gonna get interrupted, I would put my life savings that it's Mark.
I just
one's
think the
pretty
timing,
good radio.
The
One's
timing,
not.
well, the timing is a lever pull, and I understand that.
But to see it as a lever pull, at least on the surface, is incorrect. But if you're saying if I'm subconsciously pulling the lever,
it's not that deep in the subconscious.
It's certainly within the realm of reason.
Yes, I don't think it's miles into the subconscious.
Listen to that flute. Can you just turn this up a little bit?
That is a nice flute.
Funk, you need to use this in your personal life, if you know what I'm saying.
I'd love to discover that, when we pass off the earth and you can see all different periods of human times.
Yeah.
That whenever you think of like the medieval ages and you have like a flautist who's like, that it's very boring music. But what if it was just this? And we think we created this, but this was what was happening like
The soulful flautist is an underrated musician. All right. Without further ado, Marc Sessler.
This feels like it's also now following it up with some sort of mundane football comment is absurd. I like a lot of these like running back rooms have a bunch of guys. I don't know why the New York Giants, who have issues, they already have issues, think that Devin Singletary is going to be a capable post Saquon Barkley lead horse. I think he's a fine guy to have as part of your running back room. They drafted Tyrone Tracy. That's a 5th rounder. They've got Deion Jackson, Eric Gray. One of these guys is going to go down with some sort of an injury or malady, and it's like suddenly you're taking a quarterback you don't trust who's injury prone in Daniel Jones, or fill in the blank there and say, we're not sure even if they stay healthy, you've got a capable running game. I will add to that we don't know what's happening with Darren Waller at tight end. So you've got Daniel Bellinger.
I'd be surprised if he doesn't retire.
Exactly.
But
It
that's
just sounds
based on
like
no other real breaking news. But
right, but how many other players are like, it's like we're into month 3 of whispers that Darren Waller doesn't maybe want to play football again. There's a lot of other stuff going on there.
We're never seeing that man on a football field ever again.
I'll put a sandwich on
last
year
when he was public about it too. He said, he's on record saying,
But this also just isn't the same version. I think we were like, what version of Darren Waller are you going to get? Like, we're 1 year later into not being convinced it's that guy.
Sunken cost.
They drafted Theo Johnson at tight end, who some people were talking up, but you just are taking your running back position, your tight end position. You have very little wide receiver before Malik Neighbors. It's like this offense. This is the crew that built up around Josh Allen. Like these were connected to that growth period, and we saw what the coaching staff could do with that. And it's not happening around whatever quarterback they actually want to play, because there's questions about that too.
Yeah. Wait a second. Can I just say, they took one of the big 3 wide receivers, though.
I like that, but I didn't list wide receiver. I'm just saying that if the wide receiver was a burning need,
Right.
and so they did address that. You can't address everything, but if you're going to lose Saquon Barkley, who, frankly, when they go to the playoffs 2 seasons ago, and that was smoke and mirrors to some degree, but Saquon had one of those seasons.
Can I say I don't think that was a terrible move?
I don't-
to pay
I'm
a
saying-
veteran running back with injury.
No, but
issues?
but you're now telling us that if Devin Singletary is your lead guy, and question marks behind him, that's risky.
I guess my counter would be Devin Singletary, while not flashy and certainly not have the name brand value of Saquon Barkley, he might actually be a better investment for what he gives you and what he costs compared to what the Eagles just paid.
I don't
for
think
Barkley.
the argument. Right. I don't think the argument is. I think you should have turned around and overpaid for a running back that has durability issues.
But you would have had to keep him in the building.
So you don't
most
do that. But you go. There was months and months.
Right.
And chances to get other teams like the wide receiver room in Buffalo.
Right.
You're throwing a lot of darts. We'll see what works. There's not a lot of likable darts here.
They got caught flat-footed, I
Just
think, at running back because they gave Devin Singletary $9.5 million guaranteed. It's like, what?
That's a lot, and
Yeah.
and that's a fair point when you factor in how much he paid. I had no idea he was getting that much guaranteed. But my only point is, at least how I looked at the exercise, if I see the team actually actively kind of trying to address it, I'm going to give them a little bit of a pass. Like the Bills, I feel like they weren't aggressive enough with their wide receivers. The Giants are trying to do it, but they're not. It's not going to happen in one day.
I don't know what they're trying to do at running back. They signed a little bit. Every one of these position groups, they've added someone somewhere.
They got a lot of work to do. I agree with you.
Don't see any, and that's a position you can usually find some free agents late in the game. But again, they went quite quickly. I'm not sure who that would be. Maybe a Kareem Hunt, maybe a Latavius Murray, but you're not going to get excited.
Let's see. Devin Singletary got 9.5 guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Devin
Rich.
Singletary. What am I missing there?
Had some nice metrics last year in terms of like making
Tony Pollard
people
get?
miss, and Tony Pollard got a similar, maybe a little more.
All right. If Neighbors is a stud, though, they're going to be a lot better on offense if the quarterback can get it to him.
Pollard got $10.4 million guaranteed, so pretty similar.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe we should stop crying poverty for the running backs. It's all turning around now.
Okay, I might have misunderstood this exercise. No, I don't think so.
Nah,
it's
go
unfinished
for it.
business. It's unfinished business. And so I didn't look at it from a team perspective. I looked at more like league wide
Go
unfinished
ahead.
perspective. I'm into the contract. So let's start with, I could divide this up into wide receiver deals and quarterback deals, but let's go wide receiver first. I made little categories.
I like it.
All right, here are some wide receiver deals I expect. Justin Jefferson. We might have to wait around to like August for this, but I think it's going to happen the way they've
Mm-hmm.
positioned
Why
it
wait?
publicly.
Like why
So this
wait
is-
another?
This is
6
quite
months.
literally unfinished
Yes.
finished business.
Business.
Yeah.
I
got
think Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins. Those would be 3 wide receivers I think are going to get good contracts this offseason. One I want to put in this category, but I don't rule out the Cowboys from messing it up, is CeeDee Lamb, who's also a free agent next year. Like, you got to do this, right? Like, I think they will do it, but now at this point,
Buy into us.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on in Dallas. And then another category is don't wait around for it to get too late, and that would kind of be next year's crew, which is Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, and Drake London. The teams that are getting it done early, we've talked about it, save a little money. So that's just like the unfinished wide receiver business. And there's been a lot of chatter, especially with JJ and Ayuk. But in the end, I think those deals get done. That's my unfinished business.
That's a little like housekeeping, if you will. I like that. Who's out there? And what's the one that the least likely of that group, you think, to get a deal? Where it could go
CD,
sideways?
I think, because
What are
I
they
don't
doing?
know.
What have they
Jared
been doing?
never let him
all
out the door.
offseason?
I don't know, because they've waited too long. You should try to get it in before Jefferson does it.
I
too,
think they're
by the
keeping
way.
CD before Dak at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Follow kind of like some of the breadcrumbs going on around here.
Nico Collins, maybe just because he's not quite at that level, but I think they know what they have, and they have a ton of cap space, so he would make a lot of sense. Let's do the quarterback too while I'm on the
Okay, go ahead.
contract beat. And these might be more interesting. I've seen people push back that is Goff actually going to get this deal? I still expect Goff.
Did you hear those Lions fans in Detroit?
Right.
You can't let that guy
It is
go
a
unpaid.
tricky contract, perhaps, of how many years of guaranteed money you're going to give, but he'll get a nice raise. Goff, Tua, and I think Jordan Love gets paid this year because I think Green Bay is smart. I think the contract they gave him last year was a sneaky great contract. a 2-year deal, gave him a little cushion. They didn't give him his 5th-year option, but I think they get contracts. Dak, it looks like, is a big fat no, which is crazy. And then just kind of like keep an eye out on Trevor. Maybe they just wait for him to get to his 5th-year option, which is fine. He's not a free agent next year. Trevor and Purdy, my unfortunate, what did you call it? Avatar? I mean, I am now Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm.
And Brock Purdy might be the most underpaid player in the league. Whether you're a huge Brock Purdy guy or a middle Brock Purdy guy, he's getting paid like a 7th-round pick for starting quarterback on one of the best teams in the NFL. So those are 2 to watch.
I think the one in there that, like a couple things happening because there's a world where Dak Prescott doesn't stay with the Cowboys after this upcoming season. And then you're the Dolphins and you're trying to figure out if you're Mike McDaniel, like how much you really want to invest in Tua, like contract for Tua when maybe a quarterback becomes available in the offseason. I'm still confounded by what to do with Tua. I know that from certain metrics he looks pristine, but like watching Tua, it's like, am I going to give this guy a giant contract?
They just seem like they are very positive about it, and he's positive about it. It just says to me they've made progress, and they're both kind of think it's going to happen.
All right, so you rock my world about that Singletary thing. So I did some digging here. So the running back market.
You're just not interested in what's a
It was
Brock
good.
Purdy gonna be? That's a tricky contract, Dan. It's a tricky one.
I also think that
Isn't he worth more than he would never get more money than Trevor? By the way,
I don't want to say
hasn't he
anything
been
about
better?
Brock because I don't want to get Mark upset. That I'm still not
Oh.
totally sold on Brock, and maybe the Niners aren't either.
Well, you should be worried about getting me upset. You know, it kept me up.
That wasn't my comparison. I love that it was because it got you fired up, but that was Jordan saying that you were Brock Purdy.
That really stuck with Greg
just
because
wanted-
as we were leaving the studio, you were still parsing that in your mind and verbally with us.
Just give me Phillip Rivers, someone that's fun at least. You know,
Well, I think it was all
Little whack.
active QBs though.
Sure.
Anyway, so you're right. You're absolutely right. Devin got 9.5 fully guaranteed, which is more than what Derrick Henry got fully guaranteed. And I'll just throw one more out there that, to the point though, 9.5 is 9.5, but Saquon got 25.5.
he got it. He got the contract.
25.5 fully guaranteed.
Not to rehash it, but you're looking at it through the lens of like, should they have re-signed Saquon Barkley? No.
We've moved on from that conversation, and at least I have. I'm more just like looking at how that market shook out in hindsight now. Let's move on. Let's go through another round.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Here we go. Where do I want to go? Where do I want to go? All right, let's stick at wide receiver and let's talk about the Ravens. So, they addressed cornerback, offensive guard in the first and second rounds. I trust the process in Baltimore, always will. But I don't like how it all ended up for Lamar here because there's a lot being put on Rashad Bateman, finally becoming that dude, first-round pick back in 2021. Do I trust Zay Flowers? Yeah. Do I think Zay Flowers can progress and even become a star? Yes. But then after Zay and after, of course, Mark Andrews, you have, again, Bateman. You have Nelson Aguilar. You have a 4th-round pick, Devontae Walker. Dart throw, Deontay Hardy, Tylan Wallace. You have a bunch of guys, just a bunch of dudes.
You're kind of back where you were.
And here's the issue. I'm not going to go crazy in the sense that if you have what Lamar brings to the table and you have Mark Andrews, who is one of the best playmaking tight ends in the sport, and Zay, who could become like a all-pro type player if things go the right way. But this team, to me, is still one injury away to either of those guys to being right back to where they always seem to be, where they are shorthanded and struggling, perhaps in January, to find a way to make the offense go. So why are we not learning, like, to me, the Miami Dolphins is another example from what happened in their last game moving forward? I just don't get it.
I'm with you. I do wonder if they felt like there was a receiver drop-off before they ended up taking Nate Wiggins with the 30th pick. He was a cornerback, and like there were pretty interesting receivers on the board, Keon Coleman, and we saw Leggett and who went in the second round. But I would have thought they would. I would have thought they would have liked to get out of that pick with the receiver, because it's not a great group, and you're going into the season with major questions there and on the offensive line where the guard positions and right tackle are shaky. They weirdly have more questions to me than a lot of the AFC like good teams, and yet I see that they're over under, and it's not showing up in Vegas yet. Like they're being seen as this like we're coming off a 1 seed and we're the favorite in the AFC North, and our over under is 11.5. And I'm not so sure. They have a lot of questions.
They're always a team though that's going to find like 2 or 3 guys between now and the start of the season that plug some holes. But I think it's like with offensive line, like where are some of these guys going to go? They drafted Roger Rosengarten. Andrew Voorhees, who was a pick last year, was injured, is coming back and like getting fairly well praised by the coaching staff. But it's like there are a lot of departures here. There were like 14 key figures that left, and suddenly the Ravens are back. I think just back where you were at wide receiver. We're like, you kind of appeased Lamar a year ago, and I'm with you on Rashad Bateman. It's like there's moments where you see it, but like there's no evidence that this guy's going to suddenly make a major leap here.
I wouldn't call him a sunken cost, but at a certain point you have to stop seeing him as the guy that you wanted him to be. I'm just looking at his 3 years in the league. He finally played, close to a full season last year, 16 games, and did not produce at a very high level at all. 32 for 367 and 1. The season before was, injuries wiped out most of the year. He only started 4 games as a rookie in 21. So you're really banking on his development in this offense. If not, it's a problem. Greg, who's that? Mark, you're next.
A team that like I always feel I'm picking on these guys, and I'm not trying to, but it's just like it's hard to see what's happening here with the Raiders because all right, fine, even if you like Gardner Minshew, like there's this is one of the weirder quarterback situations in the league where it's like you have an interim coach that became the full-time coach, and you're going into this new campaign, and there was all this kind of like I like Antonio Pierce more than you, Dan, but I think that the Raiders players like him, but you're going into a tough AFC West campaign with at best like a C+ situation at quarterback, if not a lot worse, especially if there's any sort of injury there. Their running back room, Alexander Mattison, not in love with Alexander Mattison. Zamir White, Amir Abdullah right now is listed as their starter by PFF. I know I'm not laughing at that's funny that's how that roster looks.
Got to be
paper.
Zamir White as the starter.
Sure, and I mean he's fine, but I'm not in love with that. But then they're at cornerback. They didn't have a chance because you pad your tight end room. Now Brock Bowers makes sense, but beyond Jack Jones, they are very inexperienced at corner, and you're in a division with Justin Herbert. I understand it might be Justin Herbert handing the ball off 10 more times a game, but you can't get out of the West without a loaded secondary, and it's guys like Nate Hobbs and Jacorian Bennett. They took a 5th-round flyer onto Kamarian Richardson there, but it's like that was a need. They didn't address it correctly because they have so many other needs, and the Raiders, to me, don't look a lot any better than they did at the end of last season.
They didn't want to pay Josh Jacobs. I get that. I think actually
no problem with that.
It was a wise move.
No problem with that.
They got Gardner Minshew, who played pretty well for the Colts last year, and there's a pretty decent chance, it sounds like, if Michael Penix or one of those other quarterbacks was still on the board when the Raiders picked, they would have went in that direction. But at least they have a guy in Minshew that could hold the fort. So I'm not even going really crazy there, even if it's not exciting. But you mentioned if you have a huge weakness on your team and you have an entire offseason to address it, in the back end of their defense, it seems like they are very vulnerable.
I'm always wary of the defense. Like you close really strong, you finish on a streak, and you just think like that's our defense now, and it usually doesn't carry over like that. Because on paper, you're right, Mark. Talented up front, but the back end is not a very talented group. The Bears are kind of the other team that stick with me a little bit about that. They're just assuming that their defense totally carries over, but they've at least invested more in terms of picks than the Raiders have.
All right.
The Bears.
Greggy.
All right. I'm going to dip into the free agency zone again and ask, where do the cornerbacks go? Maybe where do the tackles go? Because I think these are the only positions where there's actually some players available that are worth caring about. Stephon Gilmore can still play. I mentioned the Packers as a possibility, and every Packers fan that apparently has a Twitter account was like, "We roasted him, no thanks." I get, he had a bad postseason game against the Packers. I think it was Dontavian Wicks kind of cooked him up. Gilmore was a little banged up by the end of the year, and that's a risk for an older player. But he was a good player last year. He was a plus starter, so he'll help some team somewhere. Adoree Jackson is available. he can still play, I think, when he's healthy. Steven Nelson is just the guy who fills out like 1,000 snaps every year and can play a little bit. Akello Weatherspoon was a late signing from the Rams last year and played quite well. So those are 4 guys who, to me, can play some ball and are still out there. And then almost any team could use cornerbacks, but some of the most interesting ones to me would be Packers, Colts, Texans, Jags, Chargers, I would throw in there, Falcons, 49ers, Cardinals, Panthers. I mean, there's so many teams that could use cornerbacks, but those guys could go in and actually help you, I think, sooner than later. Actually step in and help.
I feel like some of those guys are like waiting till whether they can up their contract big time if there's injuries, or it's like the right team suddenly needs them at close.
Right, Gilmore, and especially Gilmore there, I think actually will get decent money. By decent, I mean like $8 million or something like that.
Yeah, I'll handcuff that with the last one I had since it's right in this category. I had the Jaguars in their secondary. I reached out to our original boss, Marc Sessler, Justin Hathaway, now working up there in the Bay Area for NBC. And despite, he is a Florida, a native Floridian.
Jaguars fan.
Right. He's from Florida, Justin?
I feel like every city you ever mentioned, he knows. Like,
he's
top
been
20
there at some point.
list and,
Anyway, Justin, huge Jags fan, and I asked him, like, what were your thoughts about their team and what the holes were, and he was not thrilled that they traded back in the first round when they had a chance to grab both of those top cornerbacks. And then when they trade back to 23, the Eagles took one of the big cornerbacks right in front of them. But then you still had, Quinion Mitchell was in the Eagles. You had Terry and Arnold still there. They went with the wide receiver, and we've talked about that it felt like the Jags had got boxed in a little bit after what happened with Calvin Ridley. So you can't kill them for that. But then they waited until the third round to take a corner. And then you look at their depth chart and you look at a team that's coming off very disappointing ending, especially on defense. Ronald Darby they brought in, who's a veteran guy, but they're asking him to kind of anchor things back there.
And he's been a journey. He's the definition of a journey right now.
Where he did a one and done where in Baltimore last year. So we'll see what happens with the Jags, but that felt like a place they maybe should have been more aggressive, and now they are perhaps vulnerable.
It's like another one of those teams where so many mocks had this type of position, cornerback going to Jacksonville, then it doesn't happen.
Right.
And it's like, that was a burning need. That's why people were saying that.
And there's only so many of these guys out there too. I do feel like it was a thing this year that free agency went faster. Guys, there's less guys maybe that are still out there, but I look at these 3 or 4 guys and think they could help them. They are maybe the number one team.
And then maybe on the old, a little more connective tissue here, you could also at the Jags and their defense, obviously they have Josh Allen and he's awesome. But I don't know if there's some with Trayvon Walker, some Rashad Bateman DNA there where they're not willing to admit that he's not going to be the other guy on the side across from Allen. So they're rolling with him and hoping he's going to develop, which makes sense. He's entering his 3rd year, but they might not have enough pass rush either. And these are problems in a division where it could be tough to defend with some of the exciting players in really everywhere in that division now, with CJ Stroud's rise, Richardson coming back, of course. We shall see.
They also have a new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen. They fired Mike Caldwell, and Nielsen, strong mustache game. If you check out his profile on the Jaguars website, was one of those guys that like everyone who's a tape head was like, wow, I love what Ryan Nielsen did with the Falcons last year. Really creative, like really maxed out, like did a good job. And I don't really doubt it, but they were a bad defense, so I don't know what to make of
that.
I'm
looking at this mustache on your laptop here, Greg.
It is
not to intrude here, but that's nice.
It's really something.
Speaking of,
he's from Simi Valley, which is known. It's like the home of cops in Southern California, and he kind of looks like a cop.
What, the home of like the
I just mean
TV show?
A lot of cops like live in Simi Valley. Oh, it's like a cop haven.
Oh yeah, he looks like he looks like a 12-year veteran.
Got a lot of cops in El Segundo too.
Do we? I guess we.
Well, that little that next.
Eric gave me a good point as a real SoCal guy.
There you go. Yeah, that's good. My old hometown of Pearl River, New York. A lot of cops and firefighters. Took that Metro North into the city. You had to be within a certain. You had to be within a certain like in terms of mileage from the city, and my town was just within that limit and had mass transportation. That's all part of it too, Mark.
I've ridden Metro North probably 600 times, and I miss it. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful way to get around town.
Shout out to the NYPD and New York Fire Department.
Absolutely.
For what they do.
Shout out to the
For what they've
Metro
done.
North workers too.
Oh,
That's one thing we all have in common. I was taking the Metro North on a almost daily basis when I was working up at Roto World
and hell, shout out to New Jersey
and
Transit.
NBC.
They've also dealt with a lot of drunk people over the years and angry businessmen going home to a house that no longer feels like a home.
Well,
Yeah,
everyone
salt
would
of the
always
earth
talk about
types.
the bar car because the bar car was still there when I was there. Like
Shout out to the bar car.
the actual bar car was there, but there was no more bar. You were allowed to drink there, but people would talk about the good old days.
But it
when
was
they actually
well,
were
yeah, because you
selling
could
booze on it.
you'd sit there with a beer with a napkin around it, a canned beer, and just stare out as the towns float by you. It's a nice
Mhm.
with your friends, wonderful thing.
Anybody get a PBA card from a friend of a friend
Yes.
through the years?
I had it throughout my New York stay.
You got to know a guy. What does it stand for?
Pro Bowlers Association.
I think it's Policemen's Benevolent
Oh
Association.
yeah, well here was the move back then. Like I remember my dad did this, and it was savvy because you get one of those. You do donate to the police, so you've done it, but you get the sticker that you put on your windshield or on the side, and then when you get pulled over invariably for speeding, like the first thing the cops see is that you donate to the police forces,
Smart.
and then you're on your way.
Well, the other one,
Even if you're a guy, you're
it's
on
a
your
little
way.
bit of a tricky move. For people that don't know what we're talking about, a PBA card, if you know someone that's a cop or is connected to a cop, you get one of these cards. And then the idea is if you ever get pulled over, when they ask for license and registration, you can hand that over, but also hand this card or flash the card. And if a cop is cool with it, he'll be like, all right, slow down.
Yeah, it's
bud."
the same as the sticker.
it
It's
easy.
like they met you, but you want this is even the sticker's
Yeah.
even more subtle. But then you have to make sure it's
How
a
would
window
the
that
sticker,
doesn't-
is it subtle, the sticker? I don't know.
Well, you also can't have it on a window that rolls down if the cop's pulling you.
Tough
It's got to
stitch.
be somewhere else. Yeah,
Classic tough.
yeah, they know where to look though.
Put it on the windshield. But he's coming from the side. All right, let's focus up. I was going to mention, we mentioned the Texans. I know, Greg, you've been following this. You are connected to Mother Japan in all ways. CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons doing their world tour. And the new video that's out there now is Micah Parsons sumo wrestling. And the first round, the sumo wrestler, did you guys see this?
Yeah.
Sumo wrestler thrashes him and then does like a rockin' the baby thing to Micah.
But
and
as
then,
CJ Stroud encourages the sumo wrestler to
Right.
do that to Parsons,
and then
They definitely seem like frenemies,
Yes.
Micah and CJ.
yeah, and then Micah, hulks up, and with the sumo wrestler doesn't realize that Micah Parsons is one of the greatest athletes known to man.
doesn't need to
And
recognize
then
it. He beat him
even
up.
with no experience, he takes out the sumo wrestler in the second round. I don't know how that ended, but I saw Micah get even. All right, let's take a break and we'll close things out. All right, we are back. We are closing up shop. We got one more show coming up on a Thursday, so make sure you tune in for that. One more thing I wanted to throw up here. We have our old friend. We had a spirited conversation about Dov Kleinman when we were in Austin for the iHeart Awards.
Yeah.
There were a few drinks that were had that evening, as I recall, and I came out in casual conversation as very pro Dov Kleinman.
Well, because everywhere was piling on, so I think you
was
were
trying to. Okay, that's what it was.
you were his shepherd.
couldn't remember
you
what
were
it
living
was.
your contrarian spirit, which
Yeah.
comes out in Dan sometimes.
Well,
quietly.
sitting next to you for 13 years, we'll do that. Let's throw up a tweet from Dov Kleinman. This is great. The Eagles are looking scary. Emoji of someone putting their hands over their face. Super Bowl incoming. And then it's just a bunch of the Eagles working out in the gym.
Yeah, no one has thought to lift weights yet. And the funny thing is that these aren't overly advanced workouts. They look like what you would
No.
see, young men and women doing in the gym.
I think
I mean, certainly they're stronger
They
than
look
your average
different than
one.
any other NFL team.
I think-
based on the video evidence.
I think Dov, on some ways, his Twitter feed, and Dov was really pumped up about the Tom Brady roast, by the way, also. He's all over my feed.
You got
It's
to
like,
mute him. You gotta,
chill out. Like, you're spamming me on this. But Dov, with this tweet, again, I have to give credit to what the Eagles have been able to pull off. The brainwashing is complete of the public. It's to the point now where someone could send that tweet out, and it's not even thought to be strange that they had maybe the worst collapse.
Well, he's
in the
getting
history.
dunked on for this tweet. That why are you saying
And now it's been so forgotten that Dov could send that out without even thinking that something bad happened at the end of the previous season that would maybe cause one to think that they wouldn't be obvious Super Bowl favorites.
Well, in a way, you had to love this.
Thank you to literally everyone who sent that to me, which is everyone on Twitter. I felt like sent me that Dov tweet.
You have to adore this because it backs up your general offseason theory about
it started
the whole operation.
It's so like the theory is become so hardened now that it's bulletproof. Like nothing can get through it.
I did love, first of all, the Howie comments that look, when they signed Saquon Barkley, we're zigging when the rest of the league is zagging. I like that. But
giving a 30-year-old running back with one knee, $25 million guaranteed. What a zig!
First of all,
brilliant.
First of all, Saquon Barkley is 27 years old. Let's not get crazy. There is a
running back tax +3
video put together that's part of the Eagles kind of like behind the scenes draft room of like, it's almost like Howie porn essentially, and
which is seriously the last porn one would ever want to watch.
I would agree.
And it's a behind the scenes, and people just were loving it. And our friend Evan Silva quote retweeted. You could check it out on his Twitter. Watch Howie cook. Phew, smartest GM in the NFL. And it's just him.
They even got
him behind the scenes
to my
selecting
point.
Cooper DeJean.
They even got Evan Silva.
Silva's
that's where it gets scary.
He's talked him up a number, but this is not the first year that he's been fascinated with the Eagles.
The only thing I need now is for Joel Embiid to guarantee the Eagles go to the Super Bowl and that it is complete. The circle has been completed.
Well, you don't have to worry about.
You are flushed with personal vendettas.
You got it. You had.
I've been sitting next to you for 13 years.
I think we see how you operate.
You do.
Yeah.
And you love it. You love me for it.
I almost wonder they've asked if Shakespeare was quietly like 12 incredible authors, not one. I don't buy into that at all. I think that's nonsense. But like maybe Dov Kleiman is like sort of a group of people because there's the tweeting is happening 24/7.
Yeah, and he's a shadowy figure, I think, based in Israel. We've been told.
Right across the sea.
All right, let's book him on the show immedately, Eric. Let's get to work on that.
This is ridiculous.
All right. Why are you uncomfortable with Dov talk?
You know, if you followed. If you haven't muted or blocked him, that's on you. You can't complain.
I mean,
you enjoy him.
Dov's out there. You know, he's out there doing the Lord's work, aggregating away.
Yep.
You came from Pro Football Talk, Greg.
That's
an aggregator yourself.
I came from Roto World, the original.
The originators of aggregation. All right, that's it. Let's wrap it up.
We had a code.
Final thought for you, Greg.
We had a code.
We had a code. That's it. Important a man has a code. It's important insiders have a code. Tying it all together.
I have no regrets.
All right, till Thursday. Be the call.